It's a beautiful day in the gaming store, a beautiful day for a game. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my commander?
Hi,
Hello.
welcome to the gaming store. It's me, Steven,
And Jacob.
and we're here for another episode of Won't You Be My Commander, the Mr. Rogers themed podcast about Magic the Gathering Commander. We got another, I guess, uncommon feeling today, which is kind of normal for me at this point. I don't really, whenever I see rare on a card, I just go, nope, can't be my commander, not allowed.
Double whammy today.
Yeah, we got a double whammy. I made a trade with a neighbor, Nathan, a while back. I think he was trying to get like a Renin 7 or something from me. And so I just had this whole stack of cards that I picked up. And so in the pile, I literally just grabbed any legendary creatures that I thought were out of the normal or unique. And two of those were Rograhk, Son of Rograhk. He's a red, zero-cost Kobold Warrior with First Strike, Menace, and Trample, and Partner. And another one was Kediss, Emperor Claw, Familiar, who's a 2-drop red, Elemental Lizard. And whenever a commander you control deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. I don't think I initially thought I was going to do a mono-red deck with these two. And then one day I was bored at home and I looked at him and I was like, you know, most of the time you're probably not going to see that rolled out on the table. And so I decided, why not? Let's see what we got. Let's dig into my cards. And so the adventure began.
Yeah, I definitely was not expecting it. And then since you built this deck, I had to try to do one out of my cards too. So it's actually been pretty exciting for us to brew.
Yeah, I think we had like a couple showdowns of the Rograhks to see how much better yours was than mine. I mean, it was better, noticeably, but also, I mean, I kept it competitive.
Yeah, it was nice. We did a 1v1 with our decks, and, 1v1 commander started at 30 life. I won the die roll both times we played, but I don't think that really made too much difference. I think at the first game ended where we were both at like 11, 12 life, and then I closed it out, and then the second game was pretty close too. So like even with your budget limited pool, it can be a powerhouse.
Yeah, the 1v1 kind of nerfs Kediss a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Kediss is there just to irritate all the table and whittle them down, I feel like. But, yeah, it was a fun time. So, looking at the lore, we had Killian the Godfather, where we made up our own lore. And I don't know anything about Rograhk or Kediss. Maybe we need to ask Ethan, because he seems to know all the lore. He might be the gaming store's lore master, I don't know. But I made up my own. And so I called this deck Rograhk, the Tamer of quote-unquote dragons, because Rograhk, the son of Rograhk, wants to be just like Daddy, but is just not good enough until he stumbles upon a fire lizard somewhere in his adventures that he is convinced himself is a dragon. And so when he goes around and tells people that he is Rograhk, he tells everybody that he is the Tamer of dragons, when everybody looks at it and realizes that it's actually a lizard. And that's just what he does. Whether that makes sense for the deck theme, I don't know. We'll talk about it. Maybe we'll come up with it as we go.
Actually, I think it does quite well because you look at it, 0-1 for 0, everyone kind of laughs at it, and then it's this tiny lizard. Like, no one's expecting much from them. And as we go through the deck, you'll kind of see how eye-opening they can be.
Yeah, I think when you drop a commander that low, and then midway through the game they've only killed it once, so it just costs 2 to drop it again, and everybody's like, what? Why is this a thing? But 2-drop commanders are kind of becoming my thing. Like Killian's a 2-drop. I just made a Dina deck, which I'm sure we'll cover shortly. All of those are really simple commanders to cast. And I think that's really fun.
Well, I think your thing was when you started those, you got Quintorius, that was 5 mana. Mm-hmm. You have a Piru deck that's 7 mana. Yeah,
something like that.
And then you get a couple other ones that it's really mana intensive, and unfortunately you are sometimes the slow guy at the table because you don't have the Soul Rings, the Mana Crypts, the Seething Songs. So, like, when you cast your commander, the other 2 people next to you are a threat, so that third person goes board wipe.
Yeah. Well, and that happens a lot. Where, the second I go off at all, like, oh, you have 10 spirits. And it's like not even that big of a deal. And it's like board wipe. And I go, no! Why? But that doesn't happen with Rograhk, everybody. Because Rograhk can come out multiple times for the cost of your commander once. And that's what we've learned. So stick with us as we head on through the journey of Rograhk, the Tamer of Dragons. All right, Jacob, in this segment of Won't You Be My Commander, we're going to talk about the things that are here to support Rograhk in his conquering of the world with his pet dragon, Kediss. So the two major things, I think, or three, two. We'll start with two. Maybe we'll develop into three. The how to wins, the HTWs, I made it off the top of my head. I'm pretty brilliant that way, is obviously to power up the commanders and do commander damage, because Kediss just dishes out damage that's not commander damage, and then Rograhk has menace and trample, first strike, so he's just really easy to deal it. The problem is he's a 0/1, and so what do? And so digging through my list of cards, my little box of cards, there were three that came to mind immediately, and one I added over time because I pulled it from a different deck that didn't mesh as well with it. Or didn't need it. So the first one we have is an enchantment, Dragon Mantle, which is a 1-drop. Enchant creature, when Dragon Mantle enters the battlefield, draw a card. So card draw, 1, which is nice. But also, the enchanted creature has pay 1 red. This creature gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. This could be a real problem. The second it gets on the board, maybe no one really cares at first, but maybe they do. I've learned to wait. When we played it a few times, I was like, I'm just going to wait to play it till I have the mana to pump it and I have a haste outlet. Then I'll pull out Rograhk, drop it, and then attack. To me, that's probably the most suitable for the deck. Yeah. I think when you had it, when we played, I was like, well, we're in trouble. This isn't good.
The nice thing is, too, like Dragon Mantle also is very thematic with, well, look, I'm Rograhk, I'm on a dragon, and then, of course, the coined term in Magic for the pay a red, get +1/+0 is called Fire Breathing, because there's another enchantment called that, and most dragons, good number of dragons in Magic have that pay a red pump ability, so it's been deemed called Fire Breathing.
Yeah, there's that one that from Adventures in Forgotten Realms, the legendary dragon.
Oh, or it gets, when its power hits 20.
Yeah, that made me realize that this would be pretty fun. I think that's where I saw Dragon Mantle. I was like, oh, maybe that dragon would be useful to make a deck out of. But it's a mythic, so maybe in the future when I've been playing longer. Another one, a staple for probably most red aggro decks, I want to say, would be Embercleave.
Yeah.
We're not going to get into the details on it because I think Embercleave is probably played pretty thoroughly in Commander. I had it in another deck that was like a landfall Tago Kodama. We'll get into that. It was like a budget infinite combo deck that I built one night, and it's the only one that does it, but it doesn't really rely on Embercleave ever. And so we decided to pull it and put it in our deck and just see what happens with it. Yeah, we won't get into that one too much. It's pretty obvious what that does. If anything, it's a 1/1 double strike and trample to something, but on a perfect thing, it could end the game pretty quick. A third one that we had, and this is one that I haven't gotten to use yet, was the Frill Scare Mentor, which is a 3-drop human warrior. When it enters the battlefield, put a menace counter on target non-human creature you control, and then you can pay 2 and tap it and put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control with menace. That's automatically Rograhk, but Rograhk already has a menace counter, so you could give it to Kediss, you could give it to any of your other creatures, and then every turn you can pump them up +1/+1. My one concern there is that it moves kind of slow, and as you're pumping up Rograhk, people are going to say, oh, he's got a 1/1 counter. Now he's hitting for 1 damage, and everybody takes 1 damage. It's there, but I kind of wonder.
It's incremental damage. Usually in the beginning of the game, 4-player pod, everyone's at 40 life. So it's like, oh, it's only 1 damage. It's only 2 damage. It's only 3 damage. But the key thing here is Kediss, who is your partner commander, says whenever a commander you control, that includes himself or herself. I don't want to assume
themselves.
Here. Yeah. And so it's like, oh, now they both have menace. Now you need 4 creatures to block, and then Rograhk does 1 damage now, Kediss does 2 damage, pump it one more time, now it's 2 damage and 3 damage, and with Kediss out, it's doing it to all of your opponents. So, yeah, it might only be 5 damage, but it's 5, 5, 5. You've done 15 damage.
I think when we played this in playtesting in a pot of 4, I dealt like 20-something damage in the first 3 turns with Rograhk. Because of Kediss.
Yeah, it was a pretty nice draw, too. Like, there's sometimes you
things,
have that.
Things have to fall in place. So a little combat trick here. I think this is the definition of a combat trick, right?
Yep.
I'm still learning these definitions. That's how new I am. Is Lunar Frenzy from Innistrad, Midnight Hunt. And it's a 1 red X instant. Target creature you control gets +X/+0 and gains first strike and trample till end of turn. The first strike and trample, really cool if you're doing it to Kediss. But if you're doing it to Rograhk, it doesn't matter. You just want that +X. And this is another end of the game, like, oh, I'm going to hit you for 5. And then, I'm not going to block. I'm not worried about it. And then all of a sudden it's, boom, Lunar Frenzy. There's 20 commander damage. Bye-bye. It's brutal. It hasn't happened yet. I want it to happen so bad. It's kind of like the Vorpal Sword. Except for, and that doesn't happen either. Got real close ones. Any other thoughts on that? On pumping up Rograhk?
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously other cards that do it in the deck, but we just thought these 4 kind of highlighted the best ways, or kind of like the ooh wow fun ways to do it.
And the problem becomes, what if you can block Rograhk when he's lower power, or Kediss when they're lower power? What do you do? And the answer to that was a series of a system in the deck that allows me to forgo anybody's defenses. So we've got 3 examples: a land, a creature, and a sorcery. We'll start with the land as Access Tunnel. I probably won't get into that too much. Mine's from Strixhaven. But it taps to add 1 colorless. But if I tap 3 and tap it, target creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. This was a learning moment for me, because as I was building on it, I had talked to Jacob and said, I thought about this one. This one's really hard to do because Rograhk will be over power 3 if I use Dragon Mantle or something. And Jacob corrected me and was like, just so you know, it only counts what it's at when you tap it. And so when
the ability goes on the stack and it does a power check.
Yes, and so after the power check, then it's all rules are off. You can just start pumping him up, and he still can't be blocked, which I thought was amazing to think about. And so Access Tunnel is one of, I think we have Rogue's Passage in here as well, which costs 1 more, but it's still an outlet, and the lands are harder to destroy. Especially, I don't know if Rule 0 applies to specialty lands.
Our pods here at the store, land destruction in general in Commander is kind of frowned upon. It's definitely one of those discussion topics before you play, because taking someone out of the game or putting everyone else behind isn't fun for the other 3 players.
Yeah.
But I personally think a land destruction spell here and there, and your only thing to take care of a problematic land, Rogue Passage in this deck, problematic land.
Yep.
And you have 2 of those lands.
Yep.
And so, it's not really a huge thing if someone goes, oh, I'm going to destroy that.
Yeah. I feel like it's, I understand, you come to play Commander, and when people are killing your lands that can limit that, I think the ones that serve a purpose beyond that. So, Rogue's Passage, Access Tunnel, those serve a purpose to the deck that it is a strategy to remove them. I think that's fair, personally.
Yeah, because, we have some people who run, Maze of Ith, and they have this way where they can lock out people from attacking, and then
you're not playing then either. So realistically, I think it's fair. So that's one that we have. It's a land, harder to destroy, so that makes it very viable. And when I've had it out, it's been super helpful later in the game. Then we have, for a creature, we have Sneaking Guide, which is a 1-drop Goblin Rogue. You tap 2 and tap it. A target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. And that's a lot similar to the Access Tunnel in that regard. The issue is the Sneaking Guy can be targeted and killed. In fact, when we play tested it, one of the other players actually targeted it to stop Rograhk from sneaking under his defenses. But it is something there. It's a 1-drop. It's nice and cheap. It only costs 2 to tap it out. I think it's a super valuable play. And again, this is another one of those that I wouldn't have included had you not been like, hey, Steven, Don't be dumb.
Yeah, and it's really nice to just have a little bit of redundancy in your deck, just because there are the times where things do get removed, or someone does something where they destroy your creature and could flip into that creature. So sometimes it's nice to, yes, it can be removed, but sometimes people's removal makes you find something else.
Mm-hmm. The last one we have, I mean, we have others in the deck, but the last example is a sorcery called Cosmotronic Wave. This might cost a little much. It's 4-drop, 3 colorless, 1 red. When Cosmotronic Wave deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control, creatures your opponents control can't block this turn. If I could do without that first sentence, I'd be okay with it. If it were cost less. But I think it costs what it does because it pings everything for 1 and then makes things not be able to be blocked.
Yes and no. I mean, part of it's a common, and you got to look when it was printed too. So
This is Ravnica.
yeah, and at the time there were, I mean, you had token producing decks. So the 1 damage is nice to wipe out if someone has Saprolings or Servos.
Which there's a lot of those in the gaming store.
So, like, I mean, it's still relevant text, but, you know, just making so everyone can't block for a turn. Sometimes that's all you need is, I just need to deal that last commander damage to this one problematic player, and they have 20 creatures. And
then you flash in Embercleave and destroy everything. That'd be amazing. I like that. So that's how we get Rograhk past the defenses. The little dragon tamer that could. And then we have some other things. Our haste outlets. So there's a few, and we'll get into like the improvements. We talked about that a little bit, but to start off with, we've got some basic cards. I think when I first put this one out, Zach laughed at me. The mayor of the gaming store laughed at me. Tuk Tuk Rebelfort from Zendikar Rising has Defender, Reach, and creatures you control have haste, which that's the main reason why it's in the deck. Defender and Reach actually isn't all that bad though, because I had a big problem with flyers. You know, Tuk Tuk Rebelfort, not so bad.
And it is actually nice because we do have those tap enablers, like that one you mentioned where you just pay red tap, target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked. Well, it only costs 1 mana to cast it, and now it only costs 1 mana to tap it to do that ability. So for 2 mana, I can make something unblockable right away, and then use the rest of my mana for Dragon Mantle or the Frenzy.
And in the late game, if you have Rograhk, if you haven't really brought Rograhk out, now he has haste, drop a Dragon Mantle on him, you know, those kind of things. A lot has to happen to make that work, but that's kind of how most decks are, definitely at this level. But then we also have combat tricks like Kick in the Door, which is a 1-drop from Adventures in Forgotten Realms. It just puts a 1/1 counter on target creature, so that can pump Rograhk up by 1. But most importantly, it gives haste. The venturing into the dungeon that's cool and all, but at the end of the day,
that's the only venture in the dungeon we have. So it's literally whatever the first key text of any of the 3 dungeons, and if they ever release more dungeons in the future,
which I hope they do, that'd be rad, especially for Killian. Yeah, and so now we've sped him up, we've made him unblockable, and then we powered him up to where he can knock people out, or Kediss could knock people out. And with all these combined, by the end of it, you're looking at some pretty hefty damage. Not even just commander damage, but Kediss is dishing out quite a bit. And it makes the whole table look at you like you're not a nice person. Like you're the big bad, even though you have little Rograhk out there.
And it's hilarious because it feels so bad to use premium removal on a 0 cast commander or 2 mana commander that don't really do anything necessarily. Like they're not Piru or Marenclaw or stuff like that. It's just hilarious. Like, I'm going to Path of Exile, I'm going to Swords that. Path of Exile just feels bad. It's like, oh, I pathed your 0 cost commander. Go get a basic land, put her play tapped. Oh no, now you only have to pay 1 essentially to get him back out.
And everybody's laughing when Rograhk first comes out, and then they're not laughing anymore by the end of it. They're kind of like, oh, this combo's not fun to deal with because he's not even hitting me and I'm taking damage.
I guess the key thing was like when Steve was first brewing and asked me questions, I'm like, oh, what would you change? What would you add? And he's like, oh, you want more haste outlets? And he's like, I have like 2 or 3. And I'm like, well, the problem with Rograhk and Kediss is, yeah, they're inexpensive, but how the deck's built, they're going to die a lot. So you want to have haste outlets to get them back out there, get them swinging right away, because you cannot afford to pass and let 3 other players go before you come back and swing again.
Mm-hmm. And so I feel like the how to wins, I mean, and this might be normal for red decks, I don't know, this is the first one I made. The primary how to wins are make Rograhk unblockable, charge him up as much as you can, and just swing for the fences. I don't think it gets much more complex than that.
Yeah,
I mean there's other little like tricks and stuff which we'll talk about in the next segment. But I mean, at its core, I think if you look at the deck, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and so the thing is like, oh, everyone's gonna be like, oh, it's a Voltron deck, which means you suit up someone and you swing hard. Well, we kind of make up for it with the kind of this next package. The next section we're going to talk about is, you know, trying to find them synergies that help us win the game or push in that extra damage.
The shenanigans. All right, on to the next one. All right, Jacob, we're back for the next segment. We're going to talk about some shenanigans that are added to the deck to make it, you know, a little bit more feisty for your opponents, because Rograhk takes a little bit of time to warm up. Kediss takes a little bit of time to warm up, and so now we've got maybe a little bit of an outlet that provides blockers, but also can do some damage. And what this is called pinging.
Yeah.
Okay. We have 4, and there's probably more in the deck, but there's 4 primary cards in the deck that I selected as pingers, I suppose, where every time we cast a non-creature spell, an instant or sorcery pretty much, but there are some non-creature spells in here, it deals damage to each opponent, either 1 damage or 2 damage, which I think is pretty significant, because a lot of our spells, you know, instants and sorceries are designed to pump up Rograhk. Now, every time we do it, if you get 3 of these out here, you're dealing 6 damages a play. Now I feel like players have to prioritize who they're gonna hit, who's scarier, Rograhk or the line of pingers behind him. Maybe just a bunch of like tavern junkies or something that Rograhk somehow convinced with his dragon to fight for him, I think.
I'm going to say they're the little guy believers. They couldn't believe him and Kediss and their heroic stories and wee little kobold and his quote-unquote dragon, and like all of a sudden now they're going to follow him everywhere because they're just going to watch and give a little bit of support and cheer him on. Power of believing.
Interestingly enough, I haven't had a chance to have these out on the field yet, and I've probably played 3 or 4 games now with Rograhk, and not once have I been able to get out one of these. We have Kessig Flame Breather from the new set, Crimson Vow, Gutter Snipe from what set is that?
Oh, there's so many. It's been printed in the ground, and it's a list card.
Okay, it's a list card. And then Lamholt Raconteur from the new set, Crimson Vow, and then finally Firebrand Archer from Amonkhet, I believe. Is that Amonkhet, or what is that?
Our Promise?
Our Promise? That's what we'll say it is.
Same time period.
And so all of these are really cheap. The most expensive of them is the Lamholt Raconteur, which is a 4-drop, but I believe it's also daybound. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it does 1 damage to each opponent. But then it transforms into a werewolf.
Lambolt Ravager, and then now you're doing 2 damage.
Yeah, so it's just something there to add in. These also give blockers, and they're not the primary. So if you lose one, it's not as big of a deal. And so that's the first of our shenanigans. I'm not going to dig into these too much. If you want, check out the list that we provide. Improve it how you want. Find other cards that you like. Remember that I've only been playing for like 7 months, and I just play with the cards that I have. And so some of these are new. A lot of them are old that I got from random people that were just giving me their bulk stuff. And so see how you can improve it. Take a look at the list. The next shenanigans we have, which are by far the most fun shenanigans, and I wish I had another mob rule, because I don't. That'd be a good one. We like to steal commanders.
And we don't have too much. I think he only has like the 3. Maybe there's a couple more on the deck, but... one is Song Mad Treachery, which is one of those modal double face cards from latest Zendikar. So, it's a tap land if we need it, but it's also, steal someone's creature. But what kind of creature are we trying to steal, Steve?
Commanders, and only commanders. We use the dragon's hypnotism to convince them to come and fight for us for a turn, and then we swing for the fences with other people's commanders, dealing damage through Kediss to other people. And so if a commander gets pumped up really high and they're just looking at Rograhk like, he can't do anything, and then the next turn we hijack them and then hit them and kill them with their own commander. I'm laughing just thinking about the idea of it. Yeah, they're pricier spells in the grand scheme of the mana curve for the deck. But this is kind of that one-off, this guy thinks he's got us beat. Let's pull this over and now swing with all the commanders we have. Or if you played like 2 or 3 of them, maybe later in the game you're able to play 2 of these and then swing with all your commanders and deal a lot of damage.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that my favorite for this, which synergizes so well, is Tentative Connection, which kind of fits our theme, the story, but also super synergistic because it costs 3 in a red. It's sorcery. This spell costs 3 less to cast if you control a creature with Menace, and then it's gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn.
You don't really have to wait for that Menace to come out because Rograk's already sitting there.
Yeah.
And so now this is a 2-drop spell that you can just steal.
Well, it's a
somebody.
1-drop. Costs 3 less.
It's a 1-drop. So it becomes 3 cheaper. So just like that, you have a 1-drop that you can just steal somebody's commander on a whim and make life really miserable.
I think, last time we played, I played my version. I just grabbed a bunch of cards, took some of the key points, from Steven's deck that I really liked, and that was one of them. And our neighbor Nathan was playing, I think it was Colgan, the red-black Dash Dragon.
Oh.
And then Steve here was playing Quintorius, and it was a 5-player game, and Mayor Zach was at a low life total, and I was being too nice of a guy, because I should just end games, but I took Nathan's commander and swung it into Steve's. What dragon is yours?
Bellamachus?
Yeah, the Lorehold dragon. Yeah. And instead, I should have just hit someone in the face, and I would have killed Zach and brought everyone else to like 10 life.
Yeah, and in the end, Zach won.
Yep.
Yeah. I was a little bit disappointed after that one, Jacob. I'll be honest. I've learned my lesson now that if I can have the killing blow, I'm going to take it.
Sometimes you can't be nice in Commander because other people are just going to be like, oh, I win.
And it doesn't mean like be salty, like be mean and terrible about it, but it just means like, I can either knock this guy out or I can play nice and not do anything. I'm just going to go for it. Especially like a lot of these decks I'm playing against are really good. So if I have a chance to knock one off, I should just do it.
Yeah.
So that I don't, just maybe I can survive the next round. Which, who knows what would have happened. So red has a problem with card draw, and I'm learning very quickly that I don't like Magic when I don't have cards in my hand.
You keep picking colors like red and white.
Yeah. It's very problematic for me, but they're also... I honestly can't tell you why I pick what I pick. I see a commander with a cool ability, and I go with it. And so my answer for this was to cast instants and sorceries that exile the top cards of your library, and then until the end of your next turn or the end of that turn, you can play them. So what this does is it basically just gives you a wider selection. Maybe it gives you Embercleave. Maybe it gives you, one of these steal your commander cards, right? And so the one that I pulled for this example, and there's a few in the deck, not many, is Reckless Impulse, which is a 2-drop sorcery, which allows you to exile the top 2 cards of your library and then play them until the end of your next turn, which I think is super helpful because now you have it all the way through the next turn when your mana restores. The ones that are, one-offs you have till the end of turn are a bit riskier, but they also don't cost, they probably cost about the same amount. And so it's a risky play because if you use too much of your mana to do that, you might not get as much bang for your buck. But it is a way to get additional cards in your hand. And I think...
Well, not in your hand, but...
Yeah, or...
Access to
additional cards. And of course they go away once they're exiled. But it's a red deck. So the chances of you being able to pull anything out of your graveyard anyways, slim to none.
Unless it's an artifact, usually.
Yeah, and I don't have those. So here I am, using Reckless Impulse to do that. And then finally, one I found in my Rares box, after I'd initially built the deck, is a enchantment from Ravnica called Experimental Frenzy, which is a 4-drop. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library. You can't play cards from your hand. Pay 4, destroy Experimental Frenzy. It's difficult to make it happen because I'm trying to, cast things out of my hand. But when it's starting to get down there where I'm down to 1 or 2 cards, I can see this being pretty helpful.
especially like if you have a card in your hand like the hijack and you don't want to use it now, you want to use it later to be like, oh, I recast Kediss for 4 mana now because it died the first time. All right, well, let me just sack this experimental frenzy after I've gone through a bunch of spells and someone's given me the opportunity and hijack, finish the table off with someone else's commander. And it is red, and it is a lot of instant sorceries, and there's not a lot of them that replace themselves. So there are times where you're gonna deal a total of like 60 damage to the table, but you're down to 1 or 2 cards in hand, and you top deck Experimental Frenzy, and you're like, you know what? Let's take the gamble. Let's play that top card.
And just gives you access to that last card just to see what happens. I feel like that, we'll see, but I feel like that's going to be the difference maker at some point. Like, it'll just be that, oh man, the fact that I could play a card off the top of my deck. Or even getting lands and playing lands, because it's any card. It's not just cast from your hand. It's play any card from your hand. That could be super helpful. I feel like, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, and the only problem with Experimental Frenzy is top card's a land. Okay, play my land for turn. Top card's a land. So that's the only. Yep. So you have a little bit of risk, but then you have those turns where like, hey, I have 8 lands in play and 2 mana rocks, and then so I got like 10, 11 mana available to me. Oh, well, that's a 1 mana spell. That's a 1 mana spell. That's a 2 mana spell. And it's like, oh, look, Rograhk's attacking for like 10. Oh, Kediss is out. And it's like, oh, just kidding. I'm dealing 30 damage total.
Yeah. Well, and it definitely makes you the bad guy. I'm just thinking of all the shenanigans that this whole deck, just the problems for other players that it introduces, where it's like, oh, he's not targeting me, but every time he hits somebody else, I'm getting hit for damage. That is not fun. And just watching people kind of panic is really great. I love it.
Well, it's funny because if it comes between you and an opponent that pretty much can't stop you from hitting them, all right, do I kill the Rograhk Kediss, or do I kill the person that's always getting hit? Well, I kill the Rograhk Kediss player. Well, that other player might be playing a, quote, real, unquote, deck with more answers. It's nice because it's a funny political tool. Well, if you kill the guy I'm hitting, I can't hit him anymore, and then I'm not doing any more damage. You're essentially taking 2 of us out. If you just take me out, that other player is still in the game. So it's kind of like, oh, killing the person I'm hitting might actually be more valuable to your other 2 opponents and keeps you alive in the game in a way. And it's like, aha, I have access tunnel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and I think Killian's really taught me, Killian from our episode 1 has really taught me that you can use instants as a political tool all the way throughout. And so even though I might be intending to use a double strike combat trick for myself, there might come a time where there's some kind of trade-off going on at the table where I'm like, you know what? This would do way better with this commander hitting somebody else than Rograhk. So I'll just pump you up with a double strike and let you deal with it. And so it kind of instants offer you that flexibility, and I'm sure that's a time learned lesson that Magic players for however many years have realized. But I'm just now starting to get it.
Well, I even think people with years of experience, because that was something like I said, I've been playing since probably like 2003, 2004. Probably didn't start learning those kind of things until like 2014, 2015. So, it took me a while to learn some of those things. Like, because a lot of times you focus too much on yourself. When you focus too much on yourself, you kind of close off what you see. Yep. And I've learned over time that it's like, well, sometimes you can take what you have, give it to someone else. Might seem like it benefits them, but it
actually
also
helps you in the long run.
Yeah.
Well, we'll close out this episode with just 2 kind of unique cards that just were fun to add. At least for me. Again, my pool of cards is not that thick and not that heavy, and so these were 2 cards that I just saw were they are helpful, but they're also not game changers necessarily. I'll talk about the first one, and then I'll let Jacob kind of take it from there because he seems to be super impressed by it. Curse of Hospitality is a 3-drop. It's from Crimson Vow. It's an enchantment curse. Creatures attacking the enchanted player have trample. And then whenever a creature deals combat damage to the enchanted player, that player exiles the top card of their library. Until the end of turn, that creature's controller may play that card, and they may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. This kind of adds into the experimental frenzy, sorcery, reckless impulse kind of idea where it just gives you access to one more card. But it also is political because now everybody wants to hit the other dude.
Yeah, but it's not you. But it's not your card. You're playing someone else's deck, which can be helpful because, even in a red deck, having no cards in hand or 7 cards in hand, sometimes you want to hold on to 7 cards and hitting your opponent, exiling the top card. Oh, look, there's Path of Exile, Swords of Plowshare, Infernal Grasp. It's like, oh, look, I just got to cast a kill spell to kill someone's blocker for next turn, or...
Yeah.
Just being able to keep card economy.
Or even like top decking some really big kill spells.
Oh.
I did that to Nathan, our neighbor Nathan, in the last game we played, where some of his really big hitters got exiled, and the whole board state just kind of changed because he would have top decked it the next turn. And the trajectory of the game kind of changed, and we all knew it because we all watched the cards. I didn't know what they meant because they're all cards I don't know. But he was like, oh, no, this is not good. And so it paid off for itself.
Yeah, he was playing the Expel.deck. He had the blue, black, green Hydra that whenever you casted Expel, you create a Hydra with X11 counters on it. And you hit, what is that? Something melody or something like that, where I think it's like triple X and 2 blue or something like that, and you take control of X target creatures, and then the big bad Commander Scary Forever, Villainous Wealth, that you exile top X cards of target player's library, and then you may cast a spell or spells from among them.
Oh, man. Yeah, watching his eyes kind of grow wide when that happened. I didn't get to cast them, but it was pretty cool because I'd already tapped out all my mana to just kind of to cast the enchantment, but also to get out what I was getting ready. And so just as a strategy to like take things away from people seemed pretty good. Sometimes it'll be a land, other times it'll be something big like that. And then we'll close it out with one more card.
Yeah, this is another Crimson Vow, uncommon, Alluring Suitor. I like this because it's on curve for this deck. So, turn 1, you're probably playing a tap land, or, if you're lucky enough, some kind of mana ramp, card draw, something. Turn 2, double commander. And then if your opponents are dropping Soul Rings, you might want to wait until you have a haste outlet. But if everyone's playing tap lands and you just turn 2 both your commanders. Turn 3, Alluring Suitor, 2 and a red. When you attack with exactly 2 creatures, transform Alluring Suitor. And when he flips, he turns into Deadly Dancer. Yeah, you might be attacking with a 0-1 and a 1-1, but Deadly Dancer flips, it's trample. Whenever this creature transforms into Deadly Dancer at double red. Until end of turn, you don't lose mana as steps in phase's end. Then he has pay double red. Deadly Dancer and another target creature get +1/+0 until end of turn. And the nice thing with the double red mana, you can sink it into his pump ability, get that +1 on, Dragon Tamer boy there, and get 2 damage from your commanders, and then you're doing 2 damage to the other 2 opponents. Or, you play that Fire Diamond in your hand, and now next turn you play a land, you have 5 mana. You can play another 3-drop, and then still pump Deadly Dancer, and the nice thing with red, you run out of cards, so having a mana sink like Dragon Mantle and Deadly Dancer and having a little bit of redundancy in those is kind of nice because, like I said, card economy is kind of key with red. Like, you got to know when to play things, when to just pump, and when to say pass.
Yeah, there's not a lot of ramp in red, which makes all of your decisions make or break, I feel like. So it's not the most powerful commander in the world. Probably, as we know by now, that's not really what I look to make. Mostly because I don't have the cards, but also because I like to make jank with what I can. But Rograhk, the Tamer of Dragons, he gets the job done. He's a red aggro deck, and that's at the end of the day. That's all you got to do is just bring the heat, and Kediss does that for him. And so we'll keep playing Rograhk. We'll share a link to the card list when we post this, so that you guys can have access to it. and build your own Rograhk decks and find other ways to make Rograhk great, and then share those with us. So if you want to find us, we're on Twitter at Won't You Be My Commander, so WYBM Commander. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. We will be, yep. So just keep an eye out for that, and you'll see us floating around in Magic circles on social media. Let your friends know about us. Chime in with what you think you want to hear us make, or what you've made better from what we've told you about. And we hope you have a great week. We hope you get a chance to go down to the gaming store, see some friends, see some neighbors, and play some great games, fun games of Commander. Till next time.
Won't you be my commander?